Colgan. I see a lot of familiar faces in here. Some of you probably attended the workout with him this morning. Hopefully you did, because I couldn't quite keep up with him, and so I was hoping someone here could have. I think Betsy did for a minute. Hi, Betsy. Come on in. So I think a lot of you know Dr. Colgan, and he's been writing books for many years, since the early 1980s, and has probably, 25 books out now. Has been on the advisories for different countries, ours, Canada, and he's also a great trainer. Experience this morning at the work.
People, how many are actually health professionals? Quite a few. Okay, you probably know this, but in 2003, I was involved a little earlier than that, but in 2003 we cracked the human DNA code, and we thought we had it done. We thought, now we know what it's all made of and how it works. And then by 2005 we realized that that code coded only for one thing: proteins. And we quickly found out that there wasn't 50,000. The whole of the human body is a protein. There are no other working units. The fats are only supportive of the proteins. They don't do anything. Only the proteins work. All your enzymes are proteins. The very enzymes that are enabling me to speak right now are being created moment by moment by the million, and I am able to speak because of them, and they are all proteins. So if you follow a diet that has inferior proteins, and when we're talking about inferior proteins, we're talking about most of the meat that is sold in the United States, most of the fish that is sold in the United States, all of the poultry that's sold in the United States, practically all. They are all now inferior proteins. We know that because we can measure them. So if you eat those things, and you eat them for your proteins, then you are going to make inferior cells. And the very health crises we have at the moment are as a result of us not eating the right thing. Nothing else is really very important, because nothing operates in your body except by the DNA code making proteins. So you might ask why scientists like me, who's known about this for some time, and because of that lives on a small island off the coast of Canada, where he grows his own food, grows his own cattle, grows his own sheep, grows all his own fruit, and it's all organic, and he breathes clean air because it's miles and miles from the coast. And why I would be concerned about a company like Isogenics, why I think that it's any good. Well, I was very surprised. It took a lot of persuasion, a lot of arm twisting for me to go and actually meet Jim and Kathy Coover down in Phoenix, who run the show, who are the owners. And it took 5 years. It took Jimmy Smith and Warren Lance 5 years just to get me to go down there. And really the only reason I went, because they offered me a first-class trip. I thought it would be interesting. And I took some of the products away and I got them back to my lab, which I have on the island. And as soon as I put the protein through the spec, I thought, I know that protein. Because I had worked on the very same protein in New Zealand when it was first made in 1981. And I was very surprised. And I rang Jim Coover and said, I know where you get your protein. You get it from... And he said, oh, we don't like to tell people that. So I can tell you the major reason that I am here in terms of the science was because they used that protein. Because I studied it for something like 20 years. And I studied it in relation to all sorts of other proteins. Every other protein we could get, I studied them at Rockefeller University. I studied them with athletes. I studied them with people with wasting diseases. And I went round in a great circle looking for something that was better than the whey protein concentrate from New Zealand. And I could not find it. And in 1993, I wrote a little book called The Right Protein for Muscle and Strength, in which I covered the science of it. What we knew then, we know a lot more now. And that was one big reason that I joined the company, because they used that protein. And I was sort of instrumental in getting the Isoline Pro out, because I had used a 35-gram protein shake with athletes for many years, and I knew that they could absorb that much, whereas the most shakes that you get on the market that are made, some of them are made of good whey protein concentrate, are 12 to 15 grams of protein. Isogenics had one that was 23, now 24, which was unusual, very unusual, because most of the ones that are used in hospitals are 12 to 15 grams of protein. So I was pretty intrigued by that, and then I thought, then I looked at another product, the Ionic Supreme, and it had a number of adaptogens in it which I'd been using for a long time with athletes. Every athlete that I worked with, I used adaptogens, and we started using them after Yuri Gagarin went into space. And the reason for that is because the Russians could keep a man in space, whereas the Americans couldn't. And we wondered why. And one of the reasons is they were using a large dose of Eleutherococcus centicosus every day with these cosmonauts, as they called them. And so through various scientific channels, we found out what sort of mixtures they were using. And I was, again, very surprised to see them in this mix, because normally I would get athletes to go to a Chinese medicine store and buy them every month at about $300 a month. All the athletes I work with now use Ionic Supreme, because it is a very good mixture of those adaptogens. And if anyone has any questions about that after, I can answer them. So that was two things that interested me, because it wasn't the usual thing that I had been exposed to. And I get exposed to many companies. Many companies send me their products, want me to join their boards, do everything. I have never, apart from the companies that I have personally designed the products for, I've never joined anyone's board before. And there were other reasons. When I went to Phoenix, I found that they had a real scientific team. I mean, people you could look up in the National Library of Medicine and find that they'd actually published some stuff. And they sort of knew what they were talking about, rather than people who've never published anything, which is generally the majority of the chemists that you find in nutraceutical companies. It's generally a poor man's job. People who can't get a job with Big Pharma, they take a job with a nutraceutical company. Now, I know that's a bad thing to say, but it's true. And I was very surprised to find that they had people like Dr. Suk Cho and others in their scientific team that were not like that were actually good scientists. So I was most surprised. And in fact, the head of scientific communications, David Despain, was a child when he first came to my lectures with his father, and told me at that time when I went to Phoenix that he had joined the company. He had studied nutrition and gone and did his degree in it because of me, which was interesting. So the science is there behind Isogenic. Every product that you see is not a knockoff, not a me too, not a copy of anybody else's. This is original work. And sometimes it's very frustrating. We've been working on one particular thing now for 2 years, and I don't know if we're any further ahead than we were when we started, but that's what science is about. and they do have a scientific advisory board. I think that Isogenics could publicize it a bit more because they have some professors of medicine on it that are heavy hitters with a lot of publications, and there are not many nutraceutical companies out there that have people like that. In fact, I think I'm privileged to be on that board. So the question then comes is, well, this is, of course, processed material, and I'm somebody who likes the natural material. I always tell people in my books and things, eat as close to the ground as you can, where it came from. And the only difference I know is that first the protein was one that I had studied myself, and I know it works, and therefore I was interested in using it with athletes. And I did a test with 6 triathletes of national standard, and I was amazed by the results. And I have to say that one of the things that has interested me for a long time is how many toxins we have in our bodies. I mean, the air in this room at the moment, even though Spokane, even though Spokane is a relatively clean air compared to, say, San Diego, it's still full of toxins. And I first measured these at the University of California in San Diego, taking athletes there who lived clean, who worked out every day, lived on the coast, and we put sweat bags on their back, and then we analyzed the sweat. And we found heavy metals, we found PCBs, we found DDT in their sweat. DDT's been banned since 1976. DDT, the sweat people of young guys in California. So that was so bad that I rang some friends of mine at the University of Chicago, and I said, I'm getting these amazing results and people sweat. And they said, oh, send us. So I sent them down there, and they rang me back up and said, they're a lot better than ours. They had been doing the same thing, and they were finding the toxicity of athletes in Chicago was terrible. So if you think about it, the average person is like that. The average person, not quite as toxic as an athlete, because athletes tend to breathe much more air than the average person, up to 12 times the air. So they get many more toxins. But the average person has, we know from the EPA measurements, about 70 man-made toxins in their body, apart from toxins that occur naturally, which we can't tell, how they got those. I mean, they're there everywhere. But man-made toxins, and you think, well, I'm functioning all right. At least I think I am, if I could remember what I had for dinner yesterday. That's the way it goes, though. We're the instrument, and we don't notice the toxicity in our bodies as it gets worse. And so I had, for years and years, had a toxin removal system which was very effective. We would take people and we put them through this for, I won't describe the whole thing, for 5 days, and we could measure the toxins that came out in their sweat, and they were pretty bad. Pretty bad. But that cost a lot of money. People had to come see me. They had to stay there for 5 days. They had to pay for hotels and whatever, and fees and everything. And then they went away back to their own environment again, where they immediately got more toxic. So we know that they're going into our bodies 24 hours a day. And we hear, I think that the media are somewhat biased in reporting these things, because the American Lung Association publishes a report on the air every year. And every year since the 1970s, when the EPA was started to clean it up, it's got worse. And the air in America now is worse than it's ever been in history in terms of its toxic load. And that means we are the worst we've ever been in history in terms of our toxic load. And so one of the things that interested me about Isogenics was they had a simple system that you could use every day. And my big question was, but does it work? does it work? And when I examined it in detail, I found it was a very ancient system that was used by Hippocrates. The exact same system, with botanicals and with clay to remove toxins from the intestines. And in fact, the same clay that is used in the isogenic system is now in the British Museum, and it used to be called sedulata, and it was sent all around the world as a medication. It was so important as a medication that sailing ships used to take it from Greece, where it was mined, to all around the world. And I went to the British Museum and took photographs of the cakes with the head of with the stamp of the goddess Diana on them, terra sigillata. And that is the same stuff that is used now today in the isoflush of isogenics. So that's sort of interesting. John Anderson is a very smart guy, and he had thought his way through all this, and then he developed a botanical mixture that was very similar to the one used by Hippocrates. And the reason that terra sigillata was such an important medication for nearly 20 centuries was that it was the only thing that was effective when somebody was poisoned. It was the only thing that could get the poison out of the intestines. And the reason it does that is because it's composed of very tiny crystals which have an electric charge. And most of the really virulent toxins have the opposite charge, so it attracts the molecules. It's not a matter of it soaking them up. It's a matter of magnetic attraction, which then holds them until they've been discharged from the body. So a pretty smart system, and cheap as dirt. It is dirt. Cheap as dirt, and you can use it every day. And it actually does work. So that was very interesting to me. It actually could get toxins out. I won't go into the details of how we measured that, but I can tell you it gets toxins out. Now, how much in terms of our toxic load, we don't know. But any way that you can get toxins out of the body is a good thing, because otherwise they simply build it up in the tissues and they form complexes with proteins, especially in the brain. So the very instrument that you're using to gauge yourself with is getting progressively clogged with man-made chemicals. And that's a terrible part of our society. We are slowly poisoning ourselves. And that's one reason I live on a little island off the coast of Canada. I did live in San Diego. And when I first went to San Diego, it had 5 to 10 days a year where the air index was over the level of 200, which the EPA then says is hazardous to health. When I left San Diego in 2003, it had 115 to 150 days a year where the air index was over 200. That's how polluted it has become. In fact, it's listed by the American Lung Association as the most polluted city in the United States. And that's even after Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, he did a lot to try and clean it up, but he obviously wasn't successful. So those are the reasons, the scientific reasons that I joined Isogenics. There is another reason I think that's most important, and that is Isogenics has a culture that I've never seen before. I've worked for many big companies, but I've never seen a culture like that in Isogenics. I've never seen a culture that has given me so much time for the two greatest inventions of the human mind, love and laughter. So I'm very pleased with that. And for those of you who are in Isogenics here, it's an incredibly valuable thing. It's something you won't find in many places where you work. And I can say that from having worked for 56 years. So then I went on to look at other products of Isogenics. Vitamins and minerals I won't go into. They're a solid vitamin and mineral that replaces some of the stuff that's now been removed from our food. Despite what the USDA says, if we examine the foods and we actually measure the amount of nutrients in them, it is not what you see on the label. Not at all. And you might see things on the label that are actually added to the food afterwards because they're missing in it. But most people don't know, for example, that virtually all of the vitamin C that you see in a store is made by one company. And it's made by taking corn and boiling it in sulfuric acid and then precipitating out the ascorbic acid. It's a very simple chemical process, and the ascorbic and the vitamin C is completely synthetic. It's not vitamin C that ever occurred in a plant, because vitamin C that occurs in plants is far too expensive to put in vitamin pills. So that's just an example. Now the very same corn in another company, by a slightly different chemical process, is turned into vitamin B2, riboflavin. Almost all the riboflavin you see that has been added to food or is in vitamin pills is made from corn, but it's synthetic. So that's the world that we live in, and I don't it's not going to change in our lifetime. I mean, very simple things are not going to change. Toxicity is going to get a lot worse. We know that, because people keep demanding, as we had a conversation today, they keep demanding to build houses on the best land that should be growing food. So the smaller and smaller space left to grow the food, and greater pollution from the people that live on the land. So there's no way that the toxicity is going to go down. So we have to have better systems individually to clean ourselves up. Just like many people today, I don't know how many in this room, but I'll ask, how many people have a system in their house for cleaning their water? Oh, quite a few. Me too. Now, I live on an island. I live on the freshwater lake. I guard that lake. I don't let people put stuff in it. I don't let people take their horses in the lake even. I know, I'm crazy about that. Don't you take your horse in my drinking water. But I still have a reverse osmosis system in my house to clean the water. Because even on an island which is lightly populated, the water is polluted. Sad thing, but it's true. So it's the world we live in, and so what we have to do with ourselves is we have to attach to ourselves some sort of cleaning system to get as many of the toxins out. Otherwise, they certainly build up. We know that. They will build up. If you go and you spend 2 weeks in San Diego, you are going to come back with a toxic load you didn't have before. And there's no way around it, and it doesn't matter what restaurant or anything that you eat in. Every restaurant, you've probably seen this if you've been to San Diego, every restaurant has to have on its wall that according to the government, the foods and beverages served in this restaurant contain materials that are known to be carcinogenic. They have to have that on the wall of the restaurant. Doesn't matter where it is. Now, people didn't believe me when I went to a conference down there, a scientific conference, an isogenics conference actually. I took photographs of the hotel wall in the restaurant. I took photographs of the upscale restaurants all around, and I showed them on the screen. People didn't realize that they were sitting next to a notice that said that the foods and beverages served contain substances known to be carcinogenic. But that's the way we have to live, so we have to clean ourselves up. And if we can find something that is pretty clean to provide major nutrients, like the protein that we have in the isolene protein and isolene pro, then it's a hell of a good start, because every working unit is a protein. Every working unit. If you eat chili dogs for protein, you will grow a chili dog body. There's no way around. You'll think with a chili dog brain. Every brain cell works only on proteins. All the enzymes that are ticking over in your brain right now are all proteins, and they're all made from the proteins that you eat. So if you can get a clean protein to eat, then that's a real bonus. If you can get a simple and cheap system to every day cleanse some of the toxins out of your body, then that's another big bonus. So isogenics is sort of ahead of the curve just on the cleansing system and the protein, ahead of most of the companies that I know. And that's why I joined their board. Now, I'm not going to cover a huge number of things, but I would like to talk about product B. Product B, when the company first told me that they were working with Bill Andrews, I thought it was sort of a euphemism for, we've contacted him about something. And therefore we can use his name. So I really didn't believe it. And Jim Coover said, I'll arrange for you to have dinner with him, discuss the project. So he did. Because I'd known Bill Andrews since the 80s when he started working on telomeres. And he is a leading scientist on telomeres in the world. And I thought, he's not going to be working for a little nutraceutical company. He's not going to do a project with them. They don't have enough money. But sure enough, he was doing a project that John Anderson had persuaded him that he could produce a botanical which would excite the enzyme telomerase. And that was very interesting to Bill. He didn't believe it for a moment. He told me he didn't believe it. And John sent him 15 samples, and he got a hit the first time. And he said, that sold me. And I said, you got a hit on the HALA system? He said, oh yeah. Show me all the data. I was convinced. And he is working on the project with isogenics. And it's a solid project. And it'll be going on for years yet, but because the human measurements have only just started, and they're very, very complicated. And you have to imagine, if you want to say that this substance, we know it excites telomerase in the test tube. We actually know it now that it excites telomerase in a human being. But we don't know that it does anything for telomeres yet, because telomeres shorten very slowly. It takes you a whole lifetime for them to become short enough to kill you. And they do that in about 80 to 90 years. That's why most people don't live any longer than that. Because your own systems go in and kill your DNA. Because the telomeres get too short to protect them. So the work that got the 2009 Nobel Prize, it was a breakthrough in our study of aging. Before that, anybody who said that they could extend human life to 100, 120 years was talking through their hat, because we knew about telomeres in the 1960s. And we knew they shortened at a particular rate. And we knew, of course, things like toxins and lack of exercise and poor food can shorten them faster. But even in the ideal conditions, we knew that they shortened so that by the time you were about 80, 85 years old, they got too short to support your DNA, to protect it. So anybody was saying, well, we can, stand on your head and drink this 3 times a day and you're going to live to 100, we knew they were talking through their hat. So it was a very important breakthrough in 2009 when the Nobel Prize was awarded for the work on telomeres. Because it was the probably the first, no, I would say the second real breakthrough in the study of aging. The first breakthrough was much earlier than that, and it was the finding that if you reduce your caloric intake while maintaining your nutrition, then you will live longer. And that's been proven again and again now. And we don't do it because generally the public doesn't, I don't think they believe it. Either they don't believe it, or they think that aging is not going to happen to them individually. I wish that were true, but there's nothing else out there except caloric restriction and the reduction in the length and maintaining the telomeres so that they don't reduce every decade by a certain amount. Those are the only two breakthroughs in the whole field of aging that are real. So isogenics being involved with one of them is a big thing. Big thing. There is one other telomere support product out there, and Bill Andrews was the man who developed it. He's not allowed to say that, but I am. Because the company he left, I think it was part of his contract that he doesn't talk about it, but I can talk about it. So I guess it covers most of the base products, except that I was brought in because there was a gap, I guess. There was nothing that dealt with the brain. And the brain is the most robust organ in the body. It will stand a lot of insults and still come through for you. You'll still be able to remember who you are when you wake up tomorrow morning, which isn't the case for, you know, your heart, your liver, your lungs, your kidneys. They're not so robust. The brain is in a bony case, and it has a very good barrier called the blood-brain barrier, which stops a lot of things getting to it. But it still ages from about age 25. It starts to age. It reaches its maximum size, levels off, and by age 35 we can measure the deterioration that occurs in memory, in brain speed, in balance, and it's all there. It's solid measurement. So I've been interested since 1997 in athletes and in their brain function, because one of the grants I got was to measure the brains of some athletes who had dropped out of sport, who were very promising, and there didn't seem to be any reason for them dropping out. And when we did MRIs of their brains, we managed to find 54 of them. And when we did MRIs of their brains, every single one showed brain damage. Every single one. And I thought, oh, does this mean that everybody's got brain damage? Unfortunately, it does. And now we know by age 35 we can measure it in almost everybody. So then my quest became, how do we prevent that from happening? What are the things that other people have studied that will, when you, in controlled trials, what are they that can maintain the brain? Now we know since 1997, some colleagues of mine at the Salk Institute proved for the first time in humans that the brain can grow new cells in an adult. Prior to that, all the textbooks would tell you you get a certain complement of brain cells at birth, and they get gradually eroded over your lifetime. And at some point, the number of cells is not sufficient to support your cognition. And that's inevitable. And it was very pleasing when Rusty Gage and Peter Eriksson at the Salk Institute in '97 proved that older people could grow new brain cells. It had been seen in animals since the 1960s, but and when I was at Rockefeller University, we saw it in birds. but it's never been shown in humans. Sort of grisly experiment that I describe in one of my books, but because you've got to be dead to prove it. But all the textbooks have now been changed. If you buy a modern textbook, you'll see the words neurogenesis and neuroplasticity in it, because we now know that the brain can grow new connections and new cells throughout the adult lifetime. So then the question became, how do we stimulate that neurogenesis? What are the systems most likely to break down? How do we maintain them? And how do we stimulate those? There's two areas of the brain we know that produce new cells. They grow them like a little garden. It looks like a garden. Various plants grow up, and under electron microscopy it looks like a garden. And then they line up, and by a chemical signal they march through the brain until they find the area that needs new cells. And then they spread out like a garden again, and then some of them grow up into neurons, some develop into glial cells, some other support cells, about 10 different sorts of cells. And that's why stem cell injections in the brain don't work, because they don't have the environment, they don't have the garden. It's much more complicated. And also these little things are pretty small. It's like a journey across the world from them to get from one side of the brain to the other. And it takes them 6 months of steady marching. And during that time they're very vulnerable. They're very sensitive to insult, and they'll die off. So you can see the task's getting bigger and bigger. Not only how do we stimulate them, but how do we protect them until they can get to the spot they're supposed to be at and repopulate it with cells. So that's what I've been working on since 2003, so it's 10 years now. And in 2011, Jim Coover said, we will support your work on the brain. And so I've been continuing with my research, and out of that has come the brain boost and sleep support products, because the brain boost is the result of our analysis of something like 10,000 controlled trials throughout the world, and finding those substances, there were over 100 of them, that can stimulate neurogenesis and that can protect the two systems that most fail in the brain. And I'll tell you what those are. The first one is called the acetylcholine system, and it is responsible for the formation of memories. And when that fails, then people develop Alzheimer's. The most prominent symptom is a profound loss of memory and the inability to form new memories. And the second one is called the dopamine system, and if it fails, it produces Parkinson's disease. That is the second most frequent diagnosis of brain degeneration. So we examined all of the trials that were any good, all of the really good controlled trials, on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and what were the substances that were non-toxic, that were not costing the earth, that were preferably some extract that you could make from a botanical, because then they tend to be much less toxic and they're much more available. And we came up with a list of over 100, and then we had to knock some of them off because of possible toxicity, some of them because of allergic reactions, all sorts of things. And we came down finally to a list of 15 substances. And then we had to find them throughout the world. We had to find them and test them to see that they were potent. And that was quite a job. And then we decided on only 9 of them. 9. So 8 have gone into the brain boost, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. And a couple have gone, there's 9 substances, but there's different forms, have gone into this sleep support. The reason for the 2 different ones is simple yet complex. Each of us has in our body a built-in clock, a circadian rhythm of day and night. If we interrupt that rhythm for only about 5 days, 5 days completely without sleep, and people die. Because sleep runs your body. All your growth occurs during sleep. All your recovery from exercise occurs during sleep. All the growth of strength occurs during sleep. All your skin growth occurs during sleep. Especially for the ladies to know that. If you don't get sufficient sleep, you are not going to have good skin, because all of the growth of the skin cells occurs during sleep. So, sleep is controlled by a melatonin rhythm, melatonin release from the pineal gland, and it comes on with the diminution of the light in the evening. Now we interrupt that with artificial light, so very large number of us do not get sufficient sleep. I think there are some people who even sleep with a light on, which prevents their melatonin system from working, which prevents their body from recovering, which prevents them from growing, which ages them faster, and certainly destroys your skin. But we had to make the system that helps to maintain the acetylcholine and dopamine. We had to make that as one system, because acetylcholine and dopamine, those two systems, click on in the morning when the melatonin system closes down. So you can't mix the two. Now I have seen products out there that do mix the two, which is stupid. But that's how we came up with the two different products. And I think they've been quite successful. So with the way to clean the body, the right protein to put into it, which has all the cofactors and all the minerals actually in the protein, which is one of the things that I like a lot about it, because many proteins you see on the market are just proteins. They don't have the minerals. They don't have all the cofactors that protein needs for its absorption and use by the body. So where are you going to get those things? From your food? I don't think so. So if you don't see all the multi-minerals in any protein supplement, then you know it's not going to be very effective, because it can't be absorbed and used. When protein came in nature, it came along with all those things. And unfortunately, the protein we now eat for most of our meat is degraded. So we have to have something a little better. So we have a reasonable cleansing system that does work. They have a very good protein source to provide all the working units of the body. We have an adaptogen supplement, which I used, and the only thing I would ever claim for it is that it helps recovery from exercise, because I have measured that. People claim all sorts of things for it, but it helps recovery from exercise. So that's a biggie, because if you don't exercise, you're not going to live very long anyway. We had the tantalizing possibility of product B. Product B has only been proven in the test tube at the moment, but we have the tantalizing probability or possibility that it will be proven in humans within a couple of years. And we also have the brain and sleep support. Now, there are still gaps, and Isogenics is not standing still. In fact, we're already on to, the second generation that we're working on, and there are still gaps in things that we should be doing, and we will be doing them. But the loveliest thing to me is that they're prepared to work on these gaps and put significant money into them, even if they don't know whether they're going to sell in the marketplace or not, which is pretty good. They had no idea whether my supplement was going to sell in the marketplace. In fact, their market analysis said that it wouldn't. So we've been pleasantly surprised. So I guess that's the isogenic system. I'm going to been very patient listening to me, but I'm going to throw it open for a few questions, and I'll try and keep the answers short. So, far away. Yes, sir.
Product B also, it says antioxidant support, or I mean antioxidant and telomere support. It seems like there's a awfully big antioxidant component to product B, more than just the telomerase part.
Oh,
it just seems like that's
yes, but the important thing about it is the induction of the enzyme. That's the key factor. Induction of the enzyme telomerase is a very, very complicated thing. In fact, we say induction of the enzyme. In fact, it's a family of enzymes, and product B induces 2 of them. But that's the only thing that we know in science that protects the telomere, that adds the amino acid component that is broken off each time a cell divides, and it adds it back in again. And it does it very, very successfully in an infant, but it doesn't do it in adults anymore. And we think that maybe it doesn't do it in adults because it could cause proliferative growth. But we know that product B does not cause proliferative growth. So that's another interesting factor, and that you have to consider. There are many, many things that you can do that will lengthen telomeres, but almost all of them cause unwanted growth elsewhere, and that's what we call cancer. So we don't want anything that does that. In fact, inducing telomerase was thought that it may induce cancer because many cancers have telomerase induced in them as a part of the cancer growth. But we found that, in fact, it's not so. And that's one very important thing that was cleared up in the Nobel Prize work that Elizabeth Blackburn and Carol Greider, Jack Sozak did. So it's not just, there could be a heavy antioxidant component, and I'm certainly not against antioxidants as a means of protecting the body, but it's a much more complicated thing than most people think. In fact, the body produces pro-oxidants as part of its design. And if you load antioxidants too much, you could interfere with that. So people who take, bucket loads of popular antioxidants are not doing themselves any good. Yeah.
Does Isogenics or do you know anybody who plans to do studies related to addiction and nutrition?
I don't think so.
No?
It's certainly a worthy study, but costs such a lot of money.
I would imagine so.
Yes. And you know that it's terrible to say this, but even in universities and in university departments, you get grants to work on things that will sell eventually. I mean, you get some money for other things, but mostly people want to make something that then can go forward to a patent or forward to a protected sale and make money for the university, for everybody. It's life. Yes, yes.
Dr. Colgan, you mentioned earlier about the isoflush and the mineral in there that actually promotes the attraction and pulling out toxins.
Yes.
And I always understood, and those who are not familiar with isogenics, the isoflush is what I assumed was a part of simply the ability for the body to stay regular. Do you recommend that on a regular basis?
Yes, I do. The athletes I work with, those little 2-ounce shots, which I hope I was instrumental in getting out there, they can't oxidize. They're good for a couple of years. They take one of those each evening, each night. So each night with a couple of Isoflush. And as I said, it's not a very agreeable subject, but we have measured the toxins that come out.
They do that.
Any more?
I just have one that kind of goes with this. The walnut hull powder that's in it, what is its role? Because I find just with getting a lot of people...
Sorry?
The walnut hull powder in the flesh, because of a lot of nut allergies, I'm getting a lot of people that actually can't take that part of the program. So what is its importance to...
I think its importance is just as a scouring agent. Okay. I think it would be better, you may see that being replaced with bamboo.
You mentioned our vitamin C, or how vitamin C and B2 riboflavin is made from corn and the different processes. What is our source?
Same.
Oh, okay.
It's a sad part of life, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You can go into a health food store and you can buy acerola cherry vitamin C. According to the regulations, if you have a vat of ascorbic acid made from corn and you stand on the other side of the room and you throw a handful of acerola powder, you can call it acerola vitamin C.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I know you mentioned there's help for regrowing brain cells.
Yes.
Has there been any testing on the project of neuropathy, of renewing anything in that respect of the nerves?
Has there been any studies on this product?
Yes.
No.
Or any that you know of?
Oh, there have been many studies, yes. On neurogenesis, it's a very big topic now in research, and there are several of the components of that have been shown in controlled trials in other people's laboratories to grow new brain cells. Yes, it's very encouraging. Yes, ma'am.
So the brain boost, if someone has Parkinson's, do you recommend taking it as directed or a more aggressive approach?
Well, I unfortunately cannot, from an Isagenix point of view, I cannot comment on medical problems and the products. So, but there is the Dr. Dr. Ina Nozak at Isagenix Corporate who answers those questions every week.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Do the products you have here work adversely against any medicines, like heart thinners or...
Work what?
Work against or adversely against a medicine that you have prescribed?
Oh, that's an important question. A lot of substances we had to discard because they have interactions with common medications. You can't have things that have interactions with medications. So we had to discard those. So they don't interact with medications, as far as we know. I mean, we've studied all the research, because that's a pretty important one.
Any other questions?
No more? Gosh.
One thing.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a granddaughter that's almost 3, and she only sleeps 4 to 5 hours a night and then has a 2-hour nap. And would she be able to take the sleep spray?
No, I can't. We can't say anything for anybody under 12 because it comes into child category. It's a different thing for a product. All I can tell you is that I've used the same components that are in that in a child clinic that was run by myself and my wife before we retired, and we never had any problems with it. But
Thank you.
So, with product B, what's the age limit for that?
age limit is 18.
Yeah, so somebody
Yes.
18, 19, taking the vitamin packs with product B would be fine, or a little much.
I can't really comment on anybody under 18 for that. So I'm
No,
sorry.
no, they're over 18.
Oh, well, that's no problem. No.
Any other question back there.
Yeah.
What if you're pregnant? Can you take your products?
If you
If I'm pregnant,
Pregnant.
could I take your products?
You can't take, we can't again comment on pregnancy except to say you can certainly take the proteins. In fact, it's a very good idea to take the proteins. I could give you a little testimony on that. One of my daughters had one child. She was not using any of the products. In fact, she had a pretty bad diet, and she had a very bad time in labor, and she had a premature child. It was 4 pounds, 12 ounces, and had a lot of trouble. Was in hospital for 6 weeks. And when she came out, I angrily told her that she had to get on the isogenic shake. And she started doing it 3 months later. And yeah, no, the shakes do not make pregnant. And the second child, she had no problems with the pregnancy. She hardly gained any fat. And the child was twice the weight of his brother, and he's actually now bigger than his brother and more advanced in learning. So that's a big testimony, I know, but that's the truth.
Awesome. Any other questions for Dr. Colgan? Awesome. Well, I think you did a great job, so let's give him a big hand.
Thank you.
Dr. Colgan's books are going to be available. Sound Concepts finally made it. I know some of you knew that they were MIA. They're here. And so he's got his books, and Dr. Colgan said he would happily sign and autograph any of the books you guys want to purchase. So they are available, and the Sound Concepts guy is right down the hall. So
Okay.
grab them up. I personally have read the Quiet Mind book, and I recommend it to everyone, no matter where you are in either your training, your personal advancement, or your family. I personally recommend that for everybody. And I own the rest of the 3 that are on the banner there as well, so definitely I recommend it. We
Good.
have
Thank you.
our next event's going to be at 7 o'clock. That's our Friday Night Live. So I know you guys all have the schedule. If anyone